technology from what I've seen over the last decade in some of the conversations I've had. I see little nano robots being injected into our bloodstream that are going to come back and report what's going on, or be like the engine light on your car comes on. It's going to show up on your Dick Tracy wristwatch and go, oh my God, I'm going to have a heart attack tomorrow at 3:00. I need to go in for an oil change. That is just so awesome and so scary. I don't know where it's going to come and how it's going to be bridled, or how it's going to be unleashed, and who's going to have that control.
Welcome to More Than the Gun. I'm your host, Harry Arruda. Join me as we dive into the multifaceted world of risk mitigation, public safety, and everything in between. Welcome back. Today we're honored to have on the show Michael Wanik, Chief Security Officer, on the show to share his insights on the evolving security landscape in the pharmaceutical and biotech space. Michael, welcome.
Hi, Harry. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited about this episode. As you know, in my past life, I spent 12 years with a life science company as a director of security, and probably dealt with many of the same situations and issues that you have. So I'm excited to dive into this. Let's start a little bit on your background. You have a pretty impressive career spanning over 4 decades in both the military and corporate security world. You began as a military officer and a criminal investigator in the United States Army. From there, you went on to serve in senior leadership roles across multiple industries, including healthcare, biotech, and global security. For 14 years, you managed the corporate security and emergency operations across multiple global regions for UnitedHealth Group. You led the response to many international incidents such as 9/11, the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, and the 2008 Mumbai terror attack. You recently retired as Senior Director of Corporate Security at United Therapeutics Corporation, where you created and led the company's security function for over 11 years. In addition to overseeing multi-million-dollar budgets, you were also responsible for global risk mitigation strategies and played a key role in recovering from major incidences around the world. In addition, you've served as Police Commission Chairman of the City of New Britain, Connecticut. And since 2001, you've held the coveted ASIS CPP certification. In 2018, you were named by Security Magazine as a security thought leader. And then in 2020, you were named as one of the most influential people in security. Now, as a corporate security advisor and mentor to the next generation of chief security officers, you continue to shape the future of organizational resilience and business continuity. You're currently a public safety advisor to Volt AI, a software platform for identifying weapons and other concerning anomalies through video analysis, while reporting them to security, school, law enforcement, and other entities for immediate action in virtually real time. You're an active member of the Disabled American Veterans Group and involved with wreaths across America in New Britain, Connecticut. You reside in North Carolina and Connecticut, and are starting to enjoy your newly found time in retirement life. Mike, appreciate you doing this. I'm excited to have you. This is a hot topic right now with a lot of the activism going on and a lot of stuff in pharma and biotech right now. It's an emerging market, and it's good to have you on.
Absolutely. Very, very much so an exciting time. They're saying biotech is the new software. It's where all the money's going for development.
Exactly. We always like a little bit more about the personal side of things, hear about things, how you journey started in the security industry. Can you tell us a little bit about what led to you joining the U.S. Army and then ultimately into the security industry?
Oh, it's a very exotic story. I was a child and I was laying on the bed watching the Adam 12 and then Emergency, and I got all wrapped up in that, and I said, that's the life I want. And one day I was 17 years old. I was in high school and feeling I'd like to make the jump to law enforcement, and the easiest way was to turn 18, join the Army, and enter the military police school, and that's what I did.
Yeah, the military in the past, the military was the first step in law enforcement and even in the fire services career. And a lot of people took that path. These days, things have changed. Folks are bypassing the military and coming in very young and sometimes without a lot of life experience. So I think the military is definitely has value in public safety. There's a lot of life lessons you learn there.
Absolutely. And in these years that we're talking about, the mid-'70s, the Military Police Corps actually had a true military mission. It was post-Vietnam, military law mission, I should say. It was post-Vietnam. You started with white hat duty unless you had received a curse and you went to a nuclear tower site, which I never did. The white hat duty was amazing and could open many doors into many upper paths in support missions, which all kind of opened for me over the years.
So once you left military, how did you get into security?
Well, I was in the active Army for 9 years, and I worked in various positions. It was kind of funny how it started. I think it was like a Three Stooges movie, Harry. I was standing there in a formation, and they needed someone to go to field sanitation school, which is an exotic name for learning how to dig latrines and where to put them and where to place the food and all that. And I think I was standing there, and they said someone step forward, and I think everyone in the line took one step backwards, and I went to field sanitation school. And I was a winged up private, one stripe, came back, and I was the, quote, honor graduate of field sanitation school. Ha, ha, ha. Well, what that did was make the unit look good. So when the next school came and the next school came, I kept getting tapped on the shoulder. Would you like to go to traffic accident investigation school? Would you like to go to military police investigation school? Would you like to go to the non-commissioned officers academy? So before I knew it, I was a sergeant, and I had worked the road very minimally, but I kept getting great duty assignments. And that led up into the 9th year where I was run down by a car in Germany in the line of duty. And it was a time to make a decision. Unlike today where soldiers lose a limb and they bolt a new one on and go to the battlefield. In peacetime, if you were hurt and you couldn't pass the PT test or you could foresee that happening in the future, it was a business decision. So halfway to my retirement, I left. And I subsequently took a disability. But I went home, I kind of struggled and said, yeah, I'd love to go in law enforcement. Let's start looking at that. And in those days, unlike today, there were about 150 people lined up for every job trying to go in the door. And I had no idea what civil service was like either, because everything I did up to that point was meritocracy. You performed and you got the next door to walk through. So I was waiting around, and I looked in the paper, and it said security manager. I said, oh, this sounds great. Let me go check it out. Well, that's how I got in the guard industry and became a branch manager in a guard company. Learned a lot about profit and loss, service, compliance, begging people to go to work at 2 o'clock in the morning, all sorts of life experiences that at the time I took umbrage with because it wasn't the ideal job that I wanted. But now that I look back 48 years later at that kind of stuff and say, I'm glad I made that bus stop. That taught me about life, just what you were saying about the military teaching young people. It taught me the transition to civilian life, to business, and I got to meet so many of our colleagues that were managing proprietary organizations that it made me want to move quickly to the other side, cross the bridge, and be a proprietary person. So that's how I walked into security on day one.
Nice. All those difficulties at those times you struggle with them, you shake your head, why me? But I think over time, they're great life lessons that just are down the road, help you make better decisions. It's much like people want to get into executive protection or be a CSO right from the start. And you can't. You have to have those life lessons from an early start, and it helps you grow, and it helps you make better decisions down the road. So over the 40 years, you've undoubtedly have seen a lot of change in the industry. How have you seen the security industry, specifically to pharma and biotech, change and evolve?
Yeah, I know you asked me a specific question, but let me go to the higher level and say, when I was in that guard company, one of the first major issues I had was arguing with an ex-cop who I threw away a broken chair in the office, and it turned into a 2-hour standoff about who had the power and who can do what. And as I entered the industry at that time, that was kind of the way the guard services ran in some of the proprietary organizations, where it was a person who had connections, they retired from somewhere, and that was their value, and it was guns, gates, and guards, a term that we've used multiple times over the years. That's where it started. Where the industry's gone today is just unbelievable. And if you look at the trajectory, the Hallcrest report, which was, I don't recall what year it was released, it was said there were 2.5 security people for every law enforcement person. I hear that number is estimated to be 6 or 7 security people for every law enforcement person right now. And if you back out the 20%, 30% shortage of people in law enforcement, it's probably greater. So the change is as you ask, in biotech and pharma, I think they were less dramatic than what I experienced. I think there's a lot of smart people in these organizations. They're data-driven. They want to know what works, why it works, why wouldn't it work. You have to defend your approaches at times, but that's all about being the trusted advisor within the circle of people and working in the business culture together to be seen as a business person. And I think that's probably the biggest change I've seen. You're no longer the security guy or gal. You're a business leader with a function that is needed, and everyone understands it. Although, I mean, they understand the need. I don't think they understand what we do in totality, but it's respected nowadays. It's grown a long way from guns, gates, and guards.
Well, and that's a good segue to my next question. It's the pharmaceutical and biotech industry pose unique security challenges, and it is gone beyond just securing buildings and safeguarding employees and issuing badges and alarm codes. And CSOs in this space, they often face an added complexity of securing things like clinical trials, securing extremely sensitive sites and protecting personnel like, doctors and scientists, and sometimes just beginning employees who might be unfamiliar or even resistant with having security measures in place. How have you been able to balance implementing an effective security program with, while ensuring that these professionals can continue to work without feeling, the pressure of having security or, being overly restricted?
Well, I think my style has always been to socialize myself as an ally with people. And, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you, kind of a mantra, except in a way that's respected and falls into their world. As I said, some very, very smart people that are trying to do this mission. And when their eye comes off the ball, it makes it harder for them to do the mission, or they may not want to work for the company, which means you lose talent. Or if something happens to a person, the 3 people that worked with that person leave the company. I mean, it's like anywhere else, right? So you surround yourself with good people and try to drive on. Watching the change in the technology has been amazing to see how we do things. the firm that I just left, we had a strategic partner, Craig Venter, and Craig was the guy who mapped the human genome, and that led to CRISPR, and that led to taking Dolly the sheep, which was a company we owned or bought along the way, and turning Dolly the sheep into gene editing on porcine so that xenotransplantation can occur, where you take the organs of an animal and place them in a human being to give them longer life. I would talk to my CEO, Martine, and she would look at me and just say, remember our grandfathers flew B-52 bombers and they're still in the air because all you do is change the parts. And that's what she sees for a human being, that technology is taking us there. So I'm kind of trying to come around full circle on your line of questioning. So you have the people that can do that, but they're not aware enough or they're not practical enough to look out for security of data, for their personal safety, to understand what can happen at a clinical trial. And one of the examples I've used with clinical trials is, 2014, Russia went to Crimea, and some point after that, we were going to do a clinical trial where we needed smokers, and they said, we're going to do it in Ukraine. And I said, well, I'm going to tell you, there's going to be something going down in Ukraine. I don't know when it's going to be, but here it is. And I gave the data, and they said, well, we're still going to go. And I went to my boss, and my boss said, you did your job. You gave them the data. They're making a business decision. They're taking the risk. And they did their clinical trial, and they got out before the kinetic war happened. And I said to them, do you need electricity to do this? Do you believe that if you're in a 3-year clinical trial, we get to year 2, that you might just have to throw the whole study away? Well, they went down the road, and they successfully did it. And when the war began, I went and found a business leader, and I went, hey, just wanted to say, I was right. It was just the wrong timing, But it's interesting. CRISPR is something that's been turning the world on its head. What you can do, what you can't do. People that think you're making Frankenstein, or there was news of a Chinese entity altering a human baby. These are things that you fight not only reality, you fight perceptions and rumors and misinformation and disinformation, and that's something we never did in security before either. Supply those kind of rumblings that are out there before they blow up as a political issue for the company. Yeah.
So specific to executives that are oftentimes front and center in the media, especially during high stakes situations, the clinical trials. PR situations like vaccine rollouts and things like that. How do CSOs, or what's been your success in ensuring that they're protected without compromising their leadership in a public role?
Great question. And I'll speak to my experience with Michael Moore. Michael Moore stick a microphone in the face of an executive, and we didn't have concern about someone being wrestled to the ground. We had concern about someone being embarrassed, someone who was caught so off guard they could not give a message, and therefore that would be the message that Michael Moore would use, right? These were back in the days where he made the Bowling for Columbine, I think was a movie, and I can't think of the other one. But so we started at the very basic kind of approach to it. And I went to our public relations people and I said, we need to train all the top executives on how to react to this. It's not a security issue. If you want us to, physically stop someone, I'm sure we can step in people's way and such, but I don't think that's the message we want to show, because that's exactly what they want. So we actually sent all the execs into training to learn how to verbally handle these kinds of situations. And instead of taking a step back, they would actually take a step forward and make a comment that didn't hurt them, didn't hurt the company, and took them down the road. I think each leader, in my experience, and you certainly have much more experience than I do in this, each leader has their own tolerance of personal risk, corporate risk, messaging, and they know what's coming at them. It's just how long do they want to avoid it where they have to say something and in what forum. So that's kind of where I come from on it.
Yeah, in this day and age, those are conversations that used to be avoided, especially at the beginning of a protection detail. And now it's a must. You have to have those understandings of how far they're going to go, and do they truly understand that it's not about saving your life every day. It's about saving time, but it's also about saving them from embarrassing moments. And there is definitely a PR component to a protective detail. There's a customer service protective component to the detail, and just understanding how far that executive is willing to go is key to success.
Absolutely, and you nailed it. To have signals, the signal that I definitely want out of here, save me, and the signal like don't interrupt me because I'm going to push back, I'm going to give a message, what have you, and to try to look supportive and not look like you're on the side waiting to jump out for something. And I think this builds, as time goes on, that relationship between security and the executive, that the executive understands how we think and how we plan. And I kind of built a model that said, hey, if you're going to be in a public environment, if you're going to talk about this, if there's no tickets at the door, if you will, that they're screening people to go, hey, it's Harry Arruda, he's supposed to be in the room. You help us make the decision. We'll say, hey, we'll stand down and we'll be available if something happens. And then there are others where we say, maybe you want to consider not going here, or have the forum set up in a way where you come in from the back of the room as opposed to the front of the room, kind of sanitized route to get in and out. And then it makes sense to them when they're a partner in that decision making. And I think it also protects security when the principal says to us, this is what I want. That's the position I'd like to be in. Do what the boss wants, but give our best advice and counsel. And by the way, you and your podcast with
Brian Jensen.
Yeah, sorry, it was just stuck in the back of my head. You mentioned the trusted advisor, and I went, oh, I haven't looked at that book in whatever. I went and I got the audio book and listened to that again, because that's what this detail is, the trusted advisor to that person, and that bond has to be there. And it's a very simple message, but you have to actively think about it, and the other person has to understand that you are their trusted advisor.
Right. I have found that success in my career was walking that line of being security, being an advisor, and also establishing a professional relationship to show that you care beyond just making sure they safely are walking in a crowd or safely interacting with folks. And the little things like establishing a hand signal. The famous one is the Queen, when she shifts her purse, allegedly, that means she's ready to go and get out of there. We've over time come up with our own hand signals, as you know, and that establishing that early before walking into a room has been some of the little wins that we've had to have a successful relationship with executives. It's showing that we're looking at the finer details. It's letting them know that we understand that there is politics involved sometimes, that there's personality conflicts that are involved, and that we see that. It's not just about keeping the bad guy away who may have a gun. And so there is definitely a lot more thought going into executive protection and corporate security. And I think when you can do that and you're working with a CSO, it helps them win also. And I think it enhances their program as well on a longevity standpoint. It's like you said earlier, it's beyond guards and guns and the typical goons and suits and bodyguard type movies. So you're definitely spot on.
Well, you have the people that will execute the ground level mission, and then you always have to have that one leader, point person who has the relationship, that has the gravitas to work through any situation, and has experienced, bad days where maybe things weren't done right. And I always think of the signal story that I lived when when I was in the military. I bought a lot of heroin for the government from Americans, German nationals, and third country nationals. And whenever I had the flash money that no one could touch because it would go in the evidence room if they touched it, and they could show it to them, but can't let them get it. And they showed me the dope, I would light a cigarette because that was the signal, because I didn't smoke. And then we went on a deal where my boss, great guy, he says, I'm going to go to the guest house, I'm sit down with the bad guys, and the signal will be, I'll go like this, push my hair back. And so he's sitting in the guest house, and then this woman walks in and sits down at his table, and he starts talking to her, going, hey, hey, baby. And we all jump in, with the German police and everyone, and it was just a person sitting down with him, and we blew the deal. So, yeah, picking a signal that makes sense, that is clear, is the way to go.
Yeah.
Live and learn.
So let's talk a little bit about travel security and pre-security briefings. We're seeing a lot more of those in corporate security programs. And how have you conducted those in the past when folks are traveling overseas? And then how critical are those, if you have, for staff such as scientists and other folks that are what would be considered high value targets to foreign countries or competitors?
Yeah, it's part of the job that I really enjoy. I go back to the days when George Shultz was Secretary of State and formed the Overseas Security Advisory Council, a public-private partnership on risks to American business offshore. And in those days, we had a Wang computer with a blue screen, and we'd go on and look at, whatever data we could see, and, how far we've come from those days where we're all interconnected and we don't have to wait for the annual CIA fact book to come out to understand something. We could go in and say, what happened 20 minutes ago in a location, and understand. So there's a great value there before we get to the employees, and just the knowledge that a security director or provider can give to the situation. Then you have our organization itself, the networking of the people in an organization, where I can say, oh, I know Harry operates in Mexico, so I'm going to Mexico. I'm going to call Harry and say, what's my best practice? What's my best situation for this? And we all share with each other to get that best place. Now with technology, you have to talk to the leadership about what information are you taking and how do you intend to take it, and what borders are you going to cross. And guess what? The Chinese are going to take and they're going to go into your device and they're going to copy it, and they go, oh my God, they can do that? And they go, well, guess who started that? That was us, the United States. We said, you come in and you have a computer, it's just like a suitcase, we're going to look at it. So we started that. I can encrypt my data. That's great. Chinese have a law that you have to give them the encryption keys. So when you start to educate the employees about what the risks are, you say, hey, you can go do business. It's just how deep do we want to go when we go? So usually give a sanitized device, that we're not going to plug back into our system, to tell them to take paper, be aware of their conversations. I had an executive say to me, how come when I go to this hotel, I always get the same hotel room? And it was in a certain country. And I said, well, just take a wild guess, Michael. Just take a wild guess. So I think that's all important. But when we talk about the people we worked with, Harry, that were not the executives, they were the road warriors that would go out and do the clinical trials and do inspections and audits. They're the hardest ones to handle because they have so much confidence in themselves, in their own personal story, that it's like, yeah, I know, I got it. And those are actually the tougher ones to deal with. I like dealing with the new employee and try to mold them, make them understand, what we do and how we do it. And when I make a recommendation about having a security driver, not necessarily an EP person, but a person who's trusted, who's going to have a mechanically sound car, that's probably going to have a first aid kit in the trunk, things of that nature. And I say, if my wife was going on this trip, this is what I would be telling her she needs. And then they go, okay, I'll take it. And the issue du jour is usually who's going to pay for it.
Right.
Is corporate security going to pay for that, or is my business going to pay for it? So going back to socialization that we talked about before, I make sure I let business leaders know I can support a lot of the security initiatives in the corporation, but if we're going to build a building that I don't know about that comes up this year, if we're going to send people on 100 missions to Afghanistan this year, which is something I've never had to do, that all costs money. I can't project it. You're going to project the missions. You're going to project building the building. Call me and I'll tell you how much money we need to bake into the cost of doing business. And then if they're shocked, they say, do we really need to go there? And can the person come here? Or can you go to a third-party location, if you will, go to another country, meet on common ground, get your business done, and no damage, no foul?
Right. I think a lot of folks don't think about the specifics when they travel to these countries. For example, you're talking about China. We, as security director for the life science company, we entered into the China market, and I was quick to explain to everybody, brand new phones, brand new laptops, and when you come back, you're not connecting them to our network. And some thought I was overacting until they went through the airport, and all of a sudden, like you said, they treated it as luggage. It was confiscated for a period of time. It wasn't just looked at. It was they said, we're taking this for right now. And there was a lot of panic. And in some cases, I received a phone call from the hotel saying, I hate to say it, but you were right. And this is what happened. And how do I get my stuff back? And well, we're going to have to figure that out. But there's also a confidence when folks have gone to a location multiple times that they feel like everything's going to be okay. Or I've worked with this vendor before, they're going to take care of everything. And I think that that's important to explain to them that if something should happen, how competent is that vendor to support you? Or what is their plan? Do they even have a plan? Yes, I know you don't want to explain everything because you're busy, but you're going to have to spend 5 minutes and explain to me where you're going, where you're staying, so we can provide a little bit of oversight. So in case something does happen, we can respond and take care of you. So it does come to having a relationship with folks. I think for me, it oftentimes starts at the onboarding. I'm a proponent of having a security block of instruction for 10 or 15 minutes that goes beyond the basics of just, here's your badge. Don't take photos of it and post it on Facebook. Don't share, don't put the password for your computer underneath your keyboard. It goes beyond, hey, if you're going to travel, we need to know. If you're having issues with a vendor or another company or another employee, this is who you need to call. So I think those things are important at the beginning of a person's career because it sets the tone.
Well, that's another thing you have to socialize the need for. It's not only money, time, and training, because there's so much resistance to that. Everyone agrees we should do it. It's just we don't have time to do it.
Right.
or we'll do it tomorrow, and then it gets pushed off. So 100%. But those travelers that do have an experience where I had some people that were in the large Mexican earthquake, and I had force-fed them having to take a car, I think it was 7 years ago. In the day they went there and the earthquake happened and the car was there and we knew we were there and we were controlling where they would go next, they would stay that night. We had changed their hotel rooms, we had changed their flights, and then when we were done doing what we did, it came on CNN and said, there's an earthquake in Mexico, and we had already done what we had to do. There's this belief in a lot of corporations that there's magic corporations or the government, they're going to swoop in with black helicopters and guys rappelling off of ropes, and they're going to take care of themselves. And guess what, guys? We're in charge of ourselves here. What we do today will help us. And when you get that road warrior, that the one who you described that can really take care of themselves, they think, I like waking them up with, okay, so I have your itinerary. You went on this plane, you went to this hotel, and you're in, pick a country, and not a first world country, and then just say, you never came back, you never checked in. We only have one place or two places we could start to look, and we have no idea. No one does, because you didn't tell us. And we have a duty to care for you. We have a duty to warn you about things, but you have a duty to play by the rules with us. And if you don't believe that it's important for us, go talk to your family, because we're going to have to tell your family we don't know where you are.
Right.
It's kind of like the missing persons thing, where they go, well, that person's an adult. Maybe they got kidnapped. Maybe they decided to move to Guadalajara and start a new life. But whose duty is that at that point? It's going to be an ugly couple days, and the company will be involved with it, but it's all avoidable.
It is. And especially in these times with a lot of instability, and the illegal detentions are up, kidnappings are up. There's a lot. And so I think it comes down to communication, awareness campaigns, and just, educating folks on just some simple things. It's not that big of a fight when it comes down to it. It's simple information sharing and just having an open mind. And so I think it's always going to be a challenge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And just talking about offshore travel, I tell people I'm more concerned about fire and medical emergency for you than I am an act of terror. And they go, I never thought of that. Yeah. Oh, I got my insurance card from Humana. Okay, that's going to work well where you're going. They want cash.
Right.
And you have to educate those people and their leaders. But it comes down to that time factor all the time. It's funny, and I'm sure you've had the same experience, that you'll have groups in a company that they're the ones that we're too busy, we're moving too fast, we've done it before. And then there's other groups. I had this one group of nurses that would be out in the middle of the night in the United States, going to hospitals 2:00 in the morning to Los Angeles to train people on some of the methodologies that they would need to learn, because that was the only available time to train people out there, because the rest of the time the hospital's full of people, got stuff going through. They were great customers. They always wanted to sit in the room and talk about their personal safety and our interaction, and then a bond actually started to grow between our security operations center and the nurses, where one of them said, I was just driving looking for this hospital, I couldn't find it, so I called security and they helped guide me in. It's be the service entity that call us for whatever. We're here for you. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. It's funny sometimes even when I'm at a hotel, I was recently at a hotel in Mexico, and I was standing at the elevator, and the fire extinguishers were right next to the elevator. And I just looked over at my partner. They hadn't been inspected in 3 years. And then we looked at the kind of half-ripped sign in the elevator, and that last inspection was 6 years prior.
Yeah,
So
there you go.
you just have to ask yourself, is that insurance card really going to help in those kind of situations? Probably not.
Yeah, I think people wake up when I say don't use your Western assumptions on the places you're going, because it's totally different, and you're going to be the person who can't navigate it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So we've seen a lot of incidents of nation-state actors and activists targeting pharmaceutical companies, particularly around, critical vaccine research. We've seen it with the, COVID-19 pandemic. The Russian hackers were accused of attempting to steal vaccine data from the UK, the US, and Canadian labs. And then similarly in 2020, Chinese cyber espionage targeted US biotech firms working on the coronavirus. In 2014, North Korean hackers attacked pharmaceutical company South Korea to steal information on treatment and medical technologies. What makes these industries such a high value target, and how do you think companies can protect themselves?
Well, if you're not tuned in to Made in China 2025, I would suggest that our peers and managers in these companies just take a look, because every 5 years China publishes what they want to nominate, which really is, this is the list of things we're going to steal from you. It's going to be your intellectual property. It's going to be your people. We're going to put people in your organizations. So, kind of knowing we were going to talk about this, I have to look at this. But what's in 2025 is aerospace, biotech, information technology, smart manufacturing, maritime engineering, advanced rail, electric vehicles, electrical equipment, new materials, biomedicine, agriculture, machinery and equipment, pharmaceuticals, and robotics manufacturing. Now, that's just what's on their Christmas list. There are other countries that are friendly to us that steal as much from us, but not in the ways that organization does. So one, just to be aware that you are a target. Two, to be aware that the government, especially the Chinese government, because it's no secret, Christopher Wray's out there all the time talking about it, has passed laws that make their residents, or their citizens, I guess I should say, and the relatives of their citizens responsible wherever they are in the world to get information when the government calls for it. Now, we just had a bunch of drones flying over Langley in the last day, and some other areas, and they've captured and arrested 4 or 5 young men that are students at a university, and they say we're doing experiments. Well, do your math and wonder what's going on. The spy balloon that went over us, all those kind of things. There are people actively going out and searching for this. They're actively applying for jobs. It's like an infiltrator from an animal rights perspective, trying to get into one of your vivariums or something of that nature. It is well thought out, and it's there to grab your data or to embarrass you. Just speaking about infiltration, I mean, go to Indeed and run undercover investigator, and you'll find out organizations like PETA are recruiting right out in the open, saying we want someone to come in and carry camera equipment and go into a location and take video. So whatever the use is for, it's not the intended use of the company, and the company should be aware that they are looking at this risk. Yeah.
It's back in the day when Craigslist was a thing. They were actively doing that in the San Francisco Bay Area against chefs who were serving foie gras. And they were putting ads saying, we're going to pay $20 an hour to, come in and embarrass the restaurant and take over the restaurant on a busy Friday night. And it was right there out in the open. And that's when some of the local companies realized that they were advertising it. They were quickly going on Thursday and Friday nights out to Craigslist to look it up to see if they were planning something. So it's I don't think it's that difficult oftentimes to see it. It's right there in front of you, and you just have to know where to go, and you have to look right in front of you sometimes. So let's switch gears a little bit. We talked a little bit, started to broach it a little bit on activism. It's obviously as a whole has increased over the years, but in recent years we've seen it more organized and more aggressive as an approach towards biotech. We saw it at 2019 during the BioTech conference in the UK, where activists pretty much rushed the stage and threw red paint to symbolize blood to protest the GMOs. We've seen it at the healthcare conference in San Francisco in 2017. And then we saw it in 2022 at the Mobile Works Congress. Anti-vaccine activists stormed one of the company's booths, accusing them of profiting from the pandemic. How do companies these days deal with that? How do they address it? And how has CSOs adapted to that kind of pressure?
So I think on a couple fronts, you have to understand what your risk is first. Really think about what exposure where in your company concerns you most, and start from there and work from there. I think that the socialization I spoke of before is very important, because the scientists that do this work don't feel that there are people that would do this. I think they're shocked when they find out that people are trying to be hired so they can disrupt or take damaging photos or whatever it may be. They don't realize the intensity that some of these people have. So as we know, you have people that are interested in animal rights and people that are interested in animal welfare. And animal rights are a little more aggressive than animal welfare. Let's make sure the dog has water, as opposed to let's not. Let's use the dog for an experiment, if you will. So, as you start to look at the risks, what you have, and who might knock on your door, then you have to build consensus that you're going to change some of your culture. So I had gone through this and said, we do background checks on people to make sure they don't have an act of violence or larceny, but you haven't looked at, how they present themselves sometimes in public forums about various things. I'm talking about social media. So you have to, when you start to look at these areas, realize that difference between animal rights and animal welfare, because you can have someone who's very aggressive, and you can have someone who's like I am, a friend of animals, and you want to take care of an animal, and maybe they're a little more vocal about it, but they're just sending their right of speaking to this. So you have to take the components that you observe and then put things together and understand that if you have someone who has a degree that moved from the other side of the country and wants to take a job to shovel excrement from cages somewhere, making this up, that doesn't make sense. A reasonable, prudent person would say, there's another reason why this person is here. And will security be involved in stopping this? No, this is where our human resource friends and our managers who manage these environments, if we've partnered with them and trained them and made them think a little bit about what the problem is, not trying to give them a checklist, because it doesn't work, right? It's got to be, you got to have your spidey sense on and go, this means I'm concerned, and if that means I'm concerned, then I should go, Harry, I need your opinion, and go get someone else. And then maybe bring in security or bring in whatever. But you've got to make good decisions knowing that it does exist out there. When you look at, just going back, you talked about the UK. The UK was like the most intensive place ever. I've heard so many stories when I first started working in the area. One where they dug up a corpse of a mother-in-law and held the corpse hostage until they got what they wanted or needed. And, just shocking. We in the United States had a lot of things that happened, but I think what turned the corner for us was the eco-terrorism law that came out, if we remember, when they were burning big SUVs out on the West Coast and doing things with the trees, I recall. I can't remember. We came up with some really tough laws that had severe penalties, so a lot of that changed. However, the pendulum swings back again because there was a case where some people recently, if I recall correctly, stole a pig that was being used for some sort of research, and when they were apprehended for it, they said, well, we were here because the pig was in distress and we were saving the life. And the courts actually found that to be true, which kind of just said to everyone, well, if you're going to say I'm saving an animal's life, maybe, I'll take the risk of going to do that. So it's a wild and woolly road with some twists in it. And I think the best thing is awareness and not over-judgment. It's just understanding what's happening and realize that this is an emotional issue for a lot of people. And it's more emotional than criminal, which to me is dangerous.
Right.
Emotion is dangerous.
We did see a lot of extreme eco-terrorism in the early 2000s. There's two pretty well-known bombings in the Bay Area, and there was also a lot of they really turned it up a notch when they were going after some of the companies. In one case in particular that I was involved with, they were identifying who was delivering goods like the water service, the food services, the janitorial services. And they were actually going to those employees' homes and saying, look, if you continue to provide these services to XYZ company, we're going to make your life hell. And in some cases, they were waiting for those people to leave. They would knock out a window and turn on the garden hose and cause damage. They were, destroying their personal vehicles. They were sending messages. They would, show up in a mob to some of the executives' homes. It was pretty intense. And they realized that they didn't have to go after the company directly. They could shut them down by going after some of their vendors and suppliers. And it was pretty intense. And it wasn't until the new laws came into effect and they started putting some of these activists on, identifying them as a terrorist. And there was one in particular, Daniel San Andreas. It was on the list as number one for many years. And I think he's still outstanding. So the laws have changed. I don't think we've gotten the same degree of violence and harm that the UK has, but it's been pretty intense.
Yeah, what you just described was that Shack campaign in the UK, Stop Huntington Animal Cruelty,
right,
where they just, every vendor that Huntington had in the UK, which they have a U.S. presence also, but they just put a stranglehold on it and said, if you're going to supply service there, we're going to make your life miserable. And they would just go, oh, we could live without that one account and go on our merry way. It was an amazing strategy, and it worked for them. Yeah,
it did. So with this, obviously, brand reputation is critical, especially in these industries. What company representatives say and how they respond can pretty much make or break a company for a long time. What role do you feel security plays in protecting not just the physical assets, but also the brand and the public trust, especially when there's an incident or there's misinformation that are out there? What do you think the role is?
I like to say we're always the department of yes, not the department of no, and kind of try to assist in everything we can. So while organizations have news services that look for intersections of names and things, they don't do it at the level that I think a security professional would run an operation with or get the right provider to do, to look and come back and say, hey, here's someone who's talking about us, here's someone that's spreading this, and I don't see us being out front to stop it. I think it's us out front to identify it and also see the trends that are happening. I think that's where it is. The other thing is, I think people in an industry, security leaders in an industry, tend to bond together. And it's so unlike any other entity in the company. The human resource people from Aetna don't coordinate with the UnitedHealth people, right? That doesn't happen. But I guarantee you the security leaders talk because the security threats are usually the same, and we all want to know each other. I mean, if we go back in time and we talk about InfraGard coming on the scene, and the government said, we're going to form this organization so we could have almost like Chatham House rules in the back room. We'll tell each other what's happened. And we all signed a contract in the early days. And then all the private sector people would talk and go, yeah, this happened to us last week, and this is who's doing that. And the government people would go, can't tell you anything. Can't tell you anything. And it turned out that it didn't matter because the private sector had more information to share and of value, and it ended up safeguarding more of the space. If nothing else, you make yourself a tough target as a sector, and then maybe they move somewhere else because it's easier picking somewhere else for whatever they're looking for.
Right. The growth of the public-private partnership and the InfraGards and some of the local chapters that have gotten together to share information between law enforcement and the private sector has been huge over the last, I would say, 8 to 10 years. It was oftentimes, we don't want to talk to you, you're not the cops, or you don't have any information for us that could benefit us, so we're not going to have any communications. And I think a key to a successful relationship has been the law enforcement folks that have retired earlier than expected and gone into the private sector, picked up the phone and said, hey, buddy, I know, I'm not with the department, but we have this going down. What do you know? And I think that's helped build it. And I think from that, it's showing the value of a private partnership. We have it in the Bay Area. It's fairly strong. I've attended InfraGard meetings in Las Vegas and in Southern California, and it's really strong there. And there's less red tape, less bureaucratic mess that the private sector has to go to. And sometimes there's a lot more money and a lot more resources to put towards it. So I think that tables have turned almost to where law enforcement is now expecting the private sector to help them. And it's become beneficial for everybody. I mean, you couldn't do events like the Olympics and some of these larger events without having that public-private partnership. You just can't.
Absolutely. And we mentioned OSAC before, but there's also the Domestic Security Alliance Council with the FBI, and that's a great organization. And a lot of it is funded by, there's the Security Foundation now, that's like an overarching umbrella where corporations and individuals will kick in some cash, and out of that comes more opportunities to share information and train, and with that comes trust between organizations and people and knowledge of what you do. I think one of the biggest changes I've seen in my career is that if you go to 911 and you read everything about what's occurred, they say, well, there was a failure of imagination, there was a failure of sharing, there was a failure of, you had a litany of failures, and it wasn't failures, it was the culture. And I think we changed that culture with that event, and you're getting more sharing than ever. And sometimes, a wink, wink, nod, nod, just to, keep you out of the mud is as valuable as telling you something like, I wouldn't do that. No one's broken anything. It's just, okay, wouldn't do that.
Right.
I got a signal. So I'm not saying that happens, but I will say that trust is a big word, and we need it between entities. Private sector has given the government so much more information than the government's given the private sector. And obviously there's time and place for everything, but you're starting to see a lot of that come down. I think the FBI with DSAC has done a great job reaching out domestically to organizations and having conversations, and the agents in charge of the field offices have become very good partners. And when the big guy is a partner, then the rest of the organization is going to fall back behind it.
Right. So regulatory changes seem to have an off in pharma and the biotech sectors. And how have the increasing regulatory requirements from folks like the FDA, HIPAA, GDPR, how has that impacted the way security is managed?
Yeah, I bumped into this early on where I was putting in an access control system, and the EU that works in concert with the FDA, where they have an agreement where if one country has a drug, the other one will buy off on the analysis, that kind of a thing. The EU came in to do an inspection and said, your access control system needs to be a validated system. And I said, what's that? And they said, well, when you make a drug and that machine that makes that pill comes down and it says it has X amount of this component and that, and the weight is this and the weight is that, it's like it all has to be wore out, documented, any changes needs to happen. You need to do that with your access control system. I said, I never heard of that. So I called my peers, and my peers said, I never heard that. And I talked to someone at Pfizer, and they said, if we had to do that, we'd go out of business because just trying to do it. And we actually got it done because we were told to. And I think 5 years after having it a validated system, we took it off the that regimen, whatever that control, overarching control was. But we built it into GMP, good manufacturing process. So we said, you know what? We've done this. We're not going to throw it away. We're going to maintain this. It's just we're going to do it in a different manner. So I think this is kind of like the conversation I have with international standards. International standards are a group of people's opinion, whether it's the National Fire Protection Association or ASIS or whoever. So there's a mantra that I now have called 4CR. Take your current conditions, circumstances, culture, and resources, and then go, that's what we have available to do this mission. Build your standard for that, but then guess what? You need to do it and honor it. So I see more control, Harry, coming from the inside. I don't see top down, because it's just like if the government tried to tell us what to do in cybersecurity. By the time they figured out what they wanted, it'd be 20 years down the road, and technology is something totally different, right? It's impossible.
Right.
So it's got to be us that does it as an organization, or have more unified security thought in certain areas about certain aspects of things. But, security nowadays, I'll just say this. I've told the human resource people, I said, employees look at it as an amenity. They come to work now and they want to feel safe, and they do feel safe. That's great, because if they don't, they're not going to come to work for you. Same thing ought to hold true with, our intellectual property and how we handle things. And there's lots of ways to do it. I'm just having a flashback of now where early in my career, I was at Union Carbide Corporation, and they had a document classification system, Business Confidential and whatever the two other labels were, if you will. And I had proposed that coming in the company, and someone said, no, that's too laborious, and no one will ever do that, and I don't know how you're going to keep control of it. So I said, let me do a little benchmarking. So I went to the corporate security director at Google, and he goes, oh, you know what we do? On the bottom of a document, we just write, I trust you with this document. And that means the person who's passing you that information is going, this is sensitive. Just don't throw it in the garbage can. Don't do whatever. And apparently it worked in that culture. I was never able to get that through in ours. But I mean, there's ways to build the internal control where people will actually have that as like the core DNA. And I think it's better than having a prescriptive document that pushes people to do something that in a company may make no sense whatsoever. It's also best if you're under your own culture and circumstances and resources that when you're talking to the board, if they don't like it, or the CEO, then you need more resources. So give me the resources, we could do anything. And that's a message that our CEO used to always say, don't ever say you can't do something. Just say you need more time or you need more money or more people. Tell me what it is because we need to do it. And I think that's been a large part of the success of United Therapeutics on the medical side, that they do the unbelievable things they do because people feel like they're supported and will be supported and aren't afraid to ask for more.
Yeah. I think feeling supported goes a long way, and I feel it directly helps with the security program. It's going to be an easier pill to swallow, no pun intended, when it comes down to it. So it's good.
Well, the other thing is a good car wreck, right? Where you point at someone else and go, look what happened over there. That should not happen to us. And then you build a little consensus to get something through. It's kind of like when I first came to the company, I had a blank palette and I was charged with building a program. And I came home and spoke to my wife and I say, I feel like I'm in a long hallway and there's 50 doors on each side. And if I walk down the hallway and the first 3 doors are locked, I'd go, okay, nothing I can do. The fourth one, they go, come on in. I'm going to walk in, make that change, make a friend, socialize my message, start to go a little deeper into it. And, that's how you move the ball. You can't come in and arm wrestle for everything because you're never going to get it. You got to surround yourself with raving fans that say you're doing the right thing. Get the support of the organization from a risk management perspective. My risk manager was one of my best people to have a conversation with. The CFO responsible for insurance risk, responsible for dollar risk. That's a person that has to sign off on the SEC things. One of the things in a public corporation is we put out the 10K. The 10K has the risks of the corporation in there, and you mapped that to what you're trying to accomplish in the corporate security department. That stuff is gold, and it works. But it never ends. It never ends.
No, it does not. So lastly, if you look ahead, how do you foresee security evolving in this space? Are there new technologies, new approaches that you think will define the future of protecting pharma?
Yeah, I think artificial intelligence is going to first make R&D totally different. I think it's going to it be as impactful in a positive way as it can be in a negative way to be used against us to check our research, so on and so forth. I think that's going to be an area it's going to fall between a lot of organizations or leaders on how to address this, right? It's not only how we do things, it's what we do, who our partners are, how we plug into stuff. It really is going to get complicated really quickly. And when I just talk about technology, from what I've seen over the last decade in some of the conversations I've had, I see little nano robots being injected into our bloodstream that are going to come back and report what's going on, or maybe go around there forever and be like the engine light on your car comes on. It's going to show up on your Dick Tracy wristwatch and go, oh my God, I'm going to have a heart attack tomorrow at 3:00. I need to go in for an oil change. That is just so awesome and so scary. I don't know where it's going to come and how it's going to be bridled or how it's going to be unleashed and who's going to have that control. From an insider threat perspective, the technology that's coming out now, pretty scary, because I think there'll be less and less footprints on where people were, what they did. It's going to be a challenge for the next generation security leaders.
Yeah, good stuff. So we like to close out the show with a little rapid fire questions to get to know you a little bit better outside of the security world. So I'm going to.
You said there'd be no math. You said there'd be no math.
There'd be no math. There's no math. So here we go. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
Wow. Jesus Christ. I would have that meeting all day long, learn everything about the world.
Excellent. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Ooh. There's one that sticks in my mind that I can't say. But no, I think it's knowledge is power. I think that's something that I've always hung on to and believed in, that if you're not winning at something, you can go educate yourself and come back, and you can actually have a chance of getting what you want to do.
Nice. How do you define success personally?
Wow. These are great questions, Harry. Thank you. I think successfully you have a well-rounded, holistic life with family and friends and work-life balance and satisfaction, and go home and not have that big chunk of stress in your right shoulder that kind of sits there like a bird. If you could do that, you could work all day long, have fun, get the rewards. Got to be well-rounded, balanced in everything.
What's the most important lesson you've learned from failure?
Don't fail. No. Wow. Defining failure against disappointment is something I would have to start at, because I get disappointed all the time. And I come back to failure. It wouldn't be for lack of trying, most likely, because of what I said about, having knowledge and you want something, you go and you do it. But personal failure, I think I worked too hard in the middle of my career and did it offshore, and I was away from family, and I probably could have made some better decisions on how to support my family other than with the monetary rewards. Just caught up, and I didn't get that balance that I just described a minute ago. I know I didn't have it, and I know that meant my family didn't have it.
Yeah, I can relate. What's something on your bucket list that you hope to accomplish before it's all over?
Oh, it's so funny, because as I retired, I wrote everywhere where I want to go in a book, and then my wife is still working. I said, circle the places you want to go, because I'll go everywhere else when you're not. And I thought I was doing a good thing, and I found out I was not. So she goes, well, when are we going to go to Machu Picchu? So I went to the office, and I called the travel agent. I got a trip to Machu Picchu. And she goes, why'd you do that? I said, you said that this morning at the breakfast table. So now I want to go to Machu Picchu because I want to go up those stairs before I can.
Nice. Last question. Knowing what you know now, what's something you would tell the younger self?
Wow. Wow. Loaded question. Loaded question. I think I would tell myself, go get formal education, because it was hard to, when I joined the military, I went in and then I started doing school at night. And, I ended up teaching for Central Texas College at one point because they said I qualified to do all the military education I had, so on and so forth. But bottom line is, I never finished my degree in my life, and I was able to get where I was, and I'm very lucky. But if I had to do it again, I would say to everyone, go get that education, or that maybe nowadays is a little different, get certifications, get validation of your knowledge, because not everybody needs a basket weaving degree to be a professional, but it certainly opens so many more doors faster for someone who can walk through them.
Yeah. Well, Michael, I appreciate you being on the show, and this has been a great conversation, and I look forward to having you back later on down the road.
Harry, it's always a pleasure. I'm honored to be here, and it's fun to kind of chat about these things, because it's something we don't do. We're always working. We're always head down, and to get up and just have that collaboration and communication, just kind of like the DSAC, OSAC. We do them like 3 days a year, and then you go back and you bury yourself. To do it one-on-one with another professional was great. Thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thanks again. Thank you for tuning in. Links for today's guest can be found in the show notes. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts to stay up to date on our latest episodes. You can also follow us on Instagram, check out our YouTube channel, and visit our website at morethanthegun.com for more content. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes, where together we'll explore the many layers of our profession and discover what truly makes it more than the gun. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of More Than the Gun or its host.